Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. I wasn't supposed to feel anything that afternoon, not with the exhausting day I'd had, not with the heat clinging to my skin like a second layer. I just needed a moment alone, a breath, a release of the tension I'd been carrying since morning. The bathroom was quiet, filled with soft steam and the faint scent of my vanilla body wash. I was sure, absolutely sure, I had locked the door. My heartbeat was already uneven, a mix of nerves and comfort, when the moment was suddenly ripped open by the sound of the door creaking. I froze. The world froze. And then he froze. He stood in the doorway, eyes wide, chest rising as if he had just sprinted up the stairs. His gaze didn't move, it couldn't. It stayed on my trembling hand, on the way my breath caught halfway in my throat, on the undeniable flush spreading across my cheeks. Wait was all I managed, but it came out more like a breathless moan than a protest. His fingers tightened around the doorknob. He didn't look away. Not once. The air between us shifted, heavy, charged, almost humming. I could swear I felt his heartbeat matching mine, even from across the small room. The shock should have made me cover myself instantly, hide, scramble for an excuse. But instead, something else happened. Something deeper. Something I wasn't prepared to face. Because in his eyes, I didn't see judgment. I saw hunger. Concern. Curiosity. And something dangerously close to desire. My knees weakened. My breath quickened. The steam in the room felt hotter, thicker. His jaw tensed, and he swallowed hard before whispering, I didn't know you were. He stepped back slightly, but his hand never left the knob. It was as if he was fighting himself, torn between leaving and staying. Between giving me privacy and giving in to whatever this lightning strike moment had awakened. And for a split second, I wished he wouldn't leave. The silence wrapped around us, pulsing, trembling, so fragile it felt like the next second would break everything. Then he took a single step forward. And the moment shattered into something I couldn't control. That was when everything changed. And what he said next would change the way I saw him forever. The door closed slowly behind him, but the charged silence he left in the bathroom followed me long after I wrapped myself in a robe. My pulse hadn't settled, my thoughts were louder than my heartbeat. That moment, his eyes, my breath, the way neither of us moved, wasn't just shock. It was something that had been quietly building for months, slipping into the spaces between our conversations, hidden in the places we didn't dare look directly at. Because the truth was, this wasn't the first time tension had sparked between us. It was just the first time neither of us could pretend it wasn't there. We'd always had a complicated bond, comfortable enough to joke, close enough to care, but always teetering on an edge neither of us acknowledged. He was younger, sure, but there was a steadiness in him that made me feel seen in ways I hadn't felt in years. Maybe that's why small things had started to matter too much. Like the way he always lingered a second longer when handing me something. The way my name sounded different when he said it, gentler, warmer. Or how he watched me sometimes, not with ownership, but with curiosity, like he wanted to understand the pieces of me I kept hidden. I used to brush it off. A harmless crush. A passing moment. Something I shouldn't think about, or feel. But lately, I had been feeling the distance in my own life more clearly. The silence of a home that never echoed with affection. The long nights where companionship was replaced by routine. The emptiness no one saw behind my smile. Maybe I sought solace in the bathroom that day because I was tired of feeling untouched, physically, emotionally, deeply. And maybe he walked in at the exact moment I had stopped pretending I was fine. Hours after the incident, I found him in the living room. He was sitting alone, elbows on his knees, head slightly down. When he heard my footsteps, he lifted his eyes slowly, and the room shifted again. His expression wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't guilt. It was something far more dangerous. Concern. Confusion. Desire he didn't know how to hide anymore. "I'm sorry," he said softly, but his voice carried weight, as if the apology wasn't about the door, but for how long he had wanted something he thought he shouldn't. "It's okay," I replied. But it didn't sound like forgiveness. It sounded like an invitation neither of us fully understood yet. He hesitated, then asked, "Are you all right?" A simple question. But it landed deeper than he intended. Because I wasn't. Not really. And I think, in that moment, he knew. We stood there, too close, too caught, too aware, until the air between us thickened again. It was in the subtle brush of his fingers against mine when I reached for the remote. In the way he looked away too slowly. In the soft tremble in my chest that refused to settle. Something unspoken had broken open between us. And neither of us was ready to close it again. The following evening, the tension between us had settled into something heavier, like the air before a storm. We were in the kitchen, ostensibly making dinner, but the room seemed charged with its own life. Every movement felt amplified, the way he reached for the same spice jar I was holding, the accidental brush of our hands, the way he paused just a fraction too long by the counter. I tried to focus on chopping vegetables, but my mind betrayed me. I noticed the way his eyes lingered on my lips when I spoke, how a slight smile tugged at the corner of his mouth whenever our shoulders bumped. And I hated it. Hated how it made my pulse spike and my thoughts spiral into places I shouldn't go. "Careful," he said softly, reaching to steady my hand as the knife slipped slightly. Our fingers touched, and I felt a shiver run through me. "I've got it," I muttered, trying to mask the way my chest was suddenly tight. But it wasn't just the brush of skin, it was the unspoken words hiding in the space between us. The longing neither of us admitted. And then it happened. She, my coworker, sent a text about meeting him for a project discussion. I saw him glance at his phone, then glance at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his expression. Something that sparked a sudden, sharp twist of jealousy inside me. "Are you busy with her later?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended, but sharp with unspoken fear. He looked at me, surprised, then sheepish. "It's just work," he said, but his eyes didn't fully meet mine. That slight avoidance, it hit me harder than I expected. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the distance between us electric. I wanted to step back, to cool my racing heart, but part of me wanted to close that distance instead. To see if the tension crackling in the air could finally be acknowledged. Our breaths synced for a moment, heavy, shallow. The clock ticked too loudly. Outside, a car passed and the moment nearly broke, but neither of us moved. Something forbidden was hanging between us, a temptation neither of us was ready to name. And yet, in that charged silence, I knew we were dangerously close to a breaking point. And all I could think was, what happens if we don't pull back? The rain outside had started as a soft drizzle, then turned into a steady rhythm against the windows. I hadn't planned to be alone with him tonight, yet somehow, we were locked in the quiet of my apartment while the world outside disappeared into gray and silver streaks. He sat on the edge of the couch, a book in his hands, though he hadn't read a word. Every so often, he glanced at me, his gaze lingering just long enough to make me aware of the small, charged space between us. My heart kept tripping over itself, each beat echoing in my ears. I tried to focus on my mug of tea, feeling the warmth seep into my hands. But then he moved closer, not abruptly, not noticeably, yet the space that had always been there evaporated. Our knees nearly touched, and the closeness made the air around us heavier, thicker, almost electric. "You're quiet tonight," he murmured, his voice soft, teasing, but with a note that pulled me in. "I'm just thinking," I said, unable to stop the flush that crept up my neck. His eyes softened, then sharpened in a way that made my stomach twist. There was a boldness in the way he leaned in slightly, a silent question hanging between us, and I realized with a jolt that neither of us wanted to break the tension, not yet. I caught his hand by accident, or maybe not, and our fingers brushed. The touch lingered too long to be accidental. My pulse raced. He didn't move away. Instead, he held it lightly, deliberately, like testing a boundary neither of us had dared acknowledge before. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside me. My thoughts scattered, my body humming with an energy I could barely name. Every word he didn't say, every glance he offered, pulled me closer to something I both feared and craved. Then, the power flickered. The lights dimmed, leaving us bathed in the muted glow of the city outside. Shadows danced across his face, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw, the depth in his eyes, the faint catch in his breath. And just as I leaned forward, almost drawn to him, the apartment door creaked open. A knock. A sound that shattered the moment. We froze, hearts hammering, inches apart. And in that heartbeat of hesitation, everything hung in the balance. The knock at the door hadn't been a neighbor or the delivery I'd been expecting. It was him, my coworker, the one whose name had sparked that twist of jealousy a few nights ago. She stepped in without hesitation, eyes flicking from me to him, and the air instantly shifted. My chest tightened, a mix of shock, confusion, and the sudden awareness that everything we'd been holding back could crumble in an instant. He stood stiffly beside me, jaw tight, a storm behind his eyes. "I didn't expect you here," he said, but the words sounded fragile, like a thin layer barely holding back something stronger. She smiled, too knowingly, too comfortably, and that smile felt like a crack in the foundation of everything I thought I understood about us. "Just thought we could finalize the project," she said, stepping closer, oblivious to the tension she was stepping into. I realized in a heartbeat that this wasn't just a coincidence. This was the test I hadn't known I was waiting for. Every subtle glance, every unspoken word between him and me, was about to face reality. His hand twitched near mine, almost like he wanted to reach out, but the wrong person was there. My pulse raced. My thoughts were spinning. I wanted to retreat, to disappear, to pretend nothing had happened, but part of me wanted to see how he would respond. And then, unexpectedly, he did. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low, deliberate, and entirely different from the hesitant, teasing tone he'd had with me before. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. I've been feeling something, for you," he confessed, looking straight at me. Not at her. Not at anyone else. Just me. His honesty hung between us like a live wire, dangerous and electrifying. Her smile faltered, a flash of confusion crossing her features. The room felt smaller. Time slowed. I could see every detail, how his eyes softened, how my own hands trembled, how the air thickened with everything unspoken until now. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't what anyone expected. And yet, in that moment, I realized the truth: desire and risk weren't always about secrecy or scandal. Sometimes, they were about honesty, vulnerability, and admitting the feelings you'd spent months burying. We stood there, caught between revelation and reaction. The tension didn't vanish, it intensified, crackling with the thrill of exposure, the danger of being seen, and the undeniable magnetic pull between us. And just as the room seemed ready to explode with unspoken emotions, the lights flickered again, casting long shadows across all three of us, leaving the next move uncertain. What would happen next? Would honesty lead to connection, or destruction? The apartment felt smaller than ever, charged with emotions too big to contain. After his confession, the air hung thick between us. I could barely breathe, yet every nerve in my body was alive, anticipating what would come next. He stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. "I had to be honest," he said, his voice steady but raw, "even if it risks everything." I swallowed hard, my chest tight. "And now, what do we do?" My words trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of knowing that nothing would ever be the same. She had paused near the doorway, watching, unsure, her presence amplifying the tension between us. But this wasn't about her anymore, it was about us. The months of subtle longing, the sparks of attraction, the stolen glances and accidental touches, they had all led to this undeniable, irreversible moment. I looked into his eyes, searching for hesitation, for doubt, but all I saw was sincerity. A raw vulnerability that mirrored my own. And that terrified me more than anything. "I don't want to lose what we have," he admitted. "But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way." My hands were trembling now, not from fear, but from anticipation and a rush of emotion I couldn't name. "Then, we face it," I whispered. "All of it. No hiding, no pretending." We both exhaled, as if releasing months of tension at once. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was charged, full of possibility. Full of choices we could no longer ignore. She finally spoke, her voice soft, almost apologetic. I didn't realize." And with that, she stepped back, leaving the space between us unbroken, untouched, ready for what was about to unfold. I could feel his hand brushing mine, intentionally this time. His touch sent a shiver through me, a subtle acknowledgement of the connection we'd been dancing around for months. And though nothing had changed outwardly, no dramatic gestures, no declarations, we both knew the balance of our relationship had shifted forever. We didn't need to speak. Every glance, every subtle shift in posture, every heartbeat told the story. We had confronted the consequences of our choices, faced the raw vulnerability of being honest, and survived the storm of emotion together. Yet the night was far from over. There was still a lingering tension, a promise of intimacy, of closeness, of love, waiting just beyond the moment. A feeling that whatever came next would redefine everything. And as the city lights glimmered through the rain-streaked window, we simply stood there, two people on the brink of something extraordinary, hearts racing, fully aware of the risks, yet unable to resist the pull toward each other. The storm had passed, but the spark remained alive, dangerous, irresistible. The storm outside had quieted to a soft drizzle, tapping gently against the windows. Inside, the apartment was warm, filled with the glow of city lights and the soft hum of the night. After the emotional whirlwind earlier, we finally allowed ourselves to breathe. He reached for my hand, this time without hesitation. Our fingers intertwined naturally, comfortably, like they were meant to fit together all along. I looked up at him, and in his eyes, I saw not just desire or tension, but something far deeper, care, understanding, and the quiet promise of something lasting. "I was so afraid of ruining everything," he whispered, his voice low and earnest. "You didn't ruin anything," I replied, feeling a laugh rise in my throat at the absurdity of how tense we had been. "We just needed honesty." A small smile curved his lips, and suddenly the weight of all the unspoken moments lifted. We sat down together on the couch, close but not forced, letting the comfort of proximity speak for what words couldn't capture. His shoulder brushed mine, and I leaned in slightly, savoring the subtle warmth of his presence. For a while, we just sat there, exchanging glances, soft smiles, and occasional light teasing, the kind that had always hinted at a deeper connection between us. No need for grand gestures. No need for words that might overcomplicate what was already perfectly clear. "I think I've wanted this for a long time," he admitted, a trace of vulnerability slipping through the teasing exterior he usually wore. "Me too," I murmured. And just like that, the months of tension, hesitation, and hidden longing felt like a distant memory. What mattered was now, the quiet, intimate certainty that we had crossed a threshold together. Outside, the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle, the city lights reflecting off wet streets. Inside, the warmth between us grew, unspoken yet undeniable. We didn't need a dramatic confession or an extravagant gesture, the connection we shared was enough. The storm had passed, and what remained was the calm, steady rhythm of two hearts finally aligned. We leaned back on the couch, fingers still intertwined, letting the peace and closeness settle around us. And in that moment, with the rain tapping softly against the window and the city lights painting gentle shadows across his face, I realized that sometimes, the most powerful romances aren't defined by grand passion, they're defined by the quiet, unwavering presence of someone who truly sees you. And as we shared that simple, tender silence, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. A deep, satisfied breath escaped me, and he mirrored it, our smiles meeting in mutual understanding. It was the beginning of something new, tender, and undeniably ours.